You know that scene in movies, the one where the scorned woman dramatically throws all her cheating husband's clothes out onto the lawn, maybe smashes his prized golf clubs with a baseball bat, or keys his car with a triumphant, tear-stained scream? Yeah, that wasn't me. My version of revenge was much colder, much quieter, and a whole lot more satisfying. It played out in the sterile, fluorescent lighting of the HR department where I, Freya Hayes, was now the newly minted department head. My husband, Mark, and his little side piece, Chloe, thought I was oblivious. They thought my silence was acceptance, or maybe just ignorance. They were so wrong. I saw everything, I knew everything, and I waited. I waited for the perfect moment, the perfect leverage, and when I got that promotion, it was like the universe handed me the keys to the perfect, slow-burn emotional torture chamber. The first real act of my carefully constructed revenge plan started innocently enough, just a regular Tuesday afternoon. The air conditioning was humming, the smell of burnt popcorn from the break room was fading, and Chloe, was sitting across from me, looking slightly overwhelmed but professionally composed. She'd been officially transferred to my HR team just last week, an internal move I'd personally orchestrated. She was no longer my equal coworker in a different department. She was my executive assistant, a position I had invented for her, a role I designed to be a special kind of hell. All right, Chloe, I said, leaning back in my leather chair, a genuine, if slightly too wide, smile plastered on my face. My voice was smooth, friendly, the voice of a professional mentor. Let's talk about my personal calendar. Mark and I have our 10-year wedding anniversary coming up. Big milestone. We usually go all out, and I've decided this year needs to be absolutely spectacular. I'm going to rely entirely on you for this. I watched her face, and that's when I saw the first tiny flicker of panic, a shadow of confusion behind her wide, blue eyes. It was barely noticeable, the kind of twitch only someone who had spent hours analyzing her every expression would catch. She knew. Deep down, she had to know. The audacity of the request, the sheer, brazen cruelty of it, forcing the woman who was sleeping with my husband to plan our 10-year anniversary trip, it was a psychological masterpiece. She cleared her throat. Of course, Freya. Congratulations on the anniversary. That sounds lovely. What kind of destination are you thinking? Tropical? European? Mark mentioned before that he loves the Mediterranean. Mark mentioned. The casual familiarity of her comment, the little detail she just happened to know, was a calculated risk on her part. Was she testing me? Was she so arrogant she thought she could use their shared knowledge to play the professional? I didn't flinch. I just chuckled, a light, airy sound that didn't reach my eyes. Mark talks a lot, doesn't he? I responded sweetly. But I'm not looking for what Mark loves, Chloe. I'm looking for what we love. What represents a decade of beautiful, unbreakable commitment. The word unbreakable landed on the desk between us like a lead weight. I slid a sleek, glossy folder across the desk. Inside were printouts of my husband's private email exchanges with her, blurred and slightly edited, so they looked like boring work documents, but she would know exactly what they represented. She didn't open the folder immediately. Her hand trembled just slightly when she reached for it. This is your first major personal assignment, I continued, my smile unwavering. I need options. 3 distinct, fully costed, meticulously planned itineraries for a 2-week trip. Think high-end. I want private villas, Michelin-star dining, maybe even a chartered yacht for a few days. The budget is essentially unlimited. I need to be wowed, Chloe. This needs to be the kind of trip that reminds us both exactly why we chose each other all those years ago. She finally opened the folder, her eyes scanning the innocuous-looking printouts, and her breathing hitched. It was just for a second, a small intake of air, but I heard it. She looked up at me, and this time the panic wasn't a shadow, it was a storm cloud in her eyes. She was finally starting to understand the game. This wasn't just a tough assignment, this was a pointed, public execution of her conscience. I understand, Freya, she stammered. Her voice was thin, reedy, a stark contrast to the confident tone she usually used in meetings. I'll get started on this immediately. When do you need the initial proposals? Let's say Monday morning, 9 a.m. Sharp, I said. And one more thing. I'm going to need you to personally contact Mark's previous assistant, remember Sarah, to get all his travel preferences, old itineraries, and his passport details. Sarah's in the Paris branch now, I believe. Just a friendly catch-up call. I want to make sure every detail, down to the brand of champagne he likes, is absolutely perfect. I don't want any slip-ups. The request was designed to be agonizing. It forced her to use her professional contacts, her professional demeanor, to facilitate the very symbol of the relationship she was actively trying to destroy. As she stood to leave, gathering her papers and the heavy folder of silent accusations, I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, just loud enough to cut through the hum of the office. Oh, and Chloe, make sure the master bedroom in that villa has a spectacular view. It needs to be the kind of room where we can remember the good times, where we can reconnect. I punctuated the last word, letting the dark insinuation hang in the air. She nodded silently, unable to meet my gaze this time, and practically fled the office. I sat there, savoring the moment. No screaming, no tears, just the quiet, beautiful hum of a plan coming together. The satisfaction wasn't a raging fire, it was a slow, delicious poison. Mark thought he was dealing with the perfect, naive wife. Chloe thought she was dealing with a clueless boss. They had both miscalculated the level of cunning required to climb the corporate ladder in this HR office, and they were about to find out that the woman who handled conflict resolution for the entire company was a master of passive-aggressive warfare. This was just the beginning. The anniversary trip was the appetizer. The main course was still to come. I poured myself a glass of water, took a long sip, and stared out the window at the busy city street. Everything was calm. Everything was exactly where I wanted it to be. Hey, if you're watching this, I want you to drop a comment right now and tell me what time it is and where you are watching from. I'm curious to see how far the story is traveling. Before the transfer, before the promotion, and certainly before that excruciating anniversary trip assignment, my life with Mark was a picture-perfect postcard of corporate success and domestic bliss. I was Freya Hayes, and my world revolved around the polished, high-stakes environment of our HR office and the cozy, predictable rhythm of my marriage. Our office was a sprawling, modern space, all glass walls and ergonomic furniture, the kind of place that screams, we care about employee wellness, while simultaneously demanding 60-hour work weeks. It was an environment that valued subtlety, strategy, and above all, discretion. Perfect, really, for what was coming. My role was in employee relations, essentially the office therapist, mediator, and occasional executioner. I handled the messy human stuff, conflict resolution, disciplinary actions, and the delicate dance of corporate restructuring. It was a job that required impeccable control, an almost supernatural ability to read people, and a smile that never quite reached the icy calculation in my eyes. I was good at it, terrifyingly good. People trusted me with their secrets, their grievances, and their careers. They called me Freya the Fixer, and I took a quiet pride in the title. It was the same skill set, this deep understanding of human weakness and leverage, that I was now dedicating entirely to Mark and Chloe. Mark, my husband, worked in finance, 2 floors down. He was a classic good guy, a little clumsy, genuinely charming, and ambitious in a way that I found endearing. We were the quintessential power couple in the company, the HR strategist and the numbers man. We lived in a beautiful house in the suburbs, had a Labrador named Bentley, and our weekend routine consisted of brunch and Netflix binges. It was comfortable, maybe even a little boring, but it was ours. The foundation felt solid, built on 10 years of shared inside jokes, financial goals, and mutual career support. Then there was Chloe. Chloe worked in marketing, the floor above me, and before her sudden promotion to my assistant, she was just another bright, energetic young professional I'd occasionally run into in the break room. She was 7 years younger than me, early 20s, with the kind of effortless confidence that comes from never having had a real setback. She was bright, quick to laugh, and had this habit of tying her long, dark hair into a messy bun that somehow still looked chic. We had the kind of friendly, superficial relationship that coworkers often share, discussing the terrible office coffee, complaining about the overly detailed expense reports, and sharing the occasional recommendation for a takeout place. I distinctly remember a conversation a few months before everything exploded. I was in the elevator, running late for a meeting, and Chloe was scrolling through her phone, looking slightly stressed. "Rough morning?" I asked, offering a sympathetic smile. She looked up and forced a laugh. "Tell me about it. Mark from finance, you know, you're Mark. He's giving me grief over a budget proposal. He's meticulous, to a fault. I swear he thinks in spreadsheets." I laughed with her. "Oh, that's just Mark being Mark. Tell him Freya said to stop torturing the marketing team." I did. He just smiled and told me he had a commitment to fiscal responsibility or something equally Mark. Why? She replied, rolling her eyes playfully. Honestly, though, he's a good sport. He's really patient when he's explaining the numbers. Patient when explaining the numbers. That phrase stuck with me. At the time, I just thought, that's nice of Mark to take the time. In retrospect, it was the sound of my life unraveling, a quiet, almost affectionate observation of my husband's character delivered by the woman he was sharing a bed with. Looking back, the signs were there, but they were so mundane, so easy to rationalize away. Mark was suddenly working late more often, attributing it to a big new project. He was more meticulous about his grooming, new cologne, hitting the gym harder. When I mentioned it, he'd just grin and say, "Gotta look good for my amazing wife, right?" And Chloe? She just seemed to be around the office more, lingering by the coffee machine on my floor, or sending cheerful, unsolicited emails about interdepartmental cooperation. They were all small, relatable moments of a busy life, nothing screaming adultery. This is the insidious part of betrayal, isn't it? It doesn't usually arrive with a dramatic flourish. It creeps in under the guise of the ordinary, the small cracks in the foundation that you choose not to notice because the idea of a catastrophic collapse is too terrifying. For me, the foundation was our shared trust, and I had been the one who was diligently ignoring the termites for months. I genuinely liked Chloe. I respected her work ethic. I saw her as a promising, if slightly green, professional. The thought that she would look me in the eye, smile, and then go upstairs to rendezvous with my husband of 10 years felt less like a betrayal of our marriage and more like a gross, professional breach of my own personal security. My relationship with Chloe was about to get intensely personal, and it was my own promotion that made it possible. I got the department head role after 6 months of intense politicking, late nights, and strategic alliance building. It was a huge step up, giving me control not only over my own HR team but also the capacity to create new roles and facilitate internal transfers across departments, especially in support functions like the executive assistant position I'd invented. The moment the promotion was official, my internal plan shifted from silent suffering to strategic warfare. I could have fired her. I could have exposed them both. But where was the fun in that? Where was the closure? I needed them to suffer slowly, to watch them twist in the wind while I, the picture of professional composure, held all the power. I can still recall the moment I signed the transfer request form for Chloe. The ink on the paper, making her officially my assistant, felt more potent than any divorce paper. I felt a surge of cold, focused energy. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't pounding. I was operating purely on strategy, like a chess master moving the final, decisive piece. Chloe was now my pawn. And Mark, sitting 2 floors down, was the utterly clueless prize I was about to snatch away, piece by painful piece. This was my office, my department, and soon it would be my new life, cleansed of the betrayal they thought they could hide. The next step was the discovery itself, the quiet, undeniable bomb that shattered my comfortable life without making a sound. The quiet bomb dropped on a rainy Thursday afternoon, not with a bang, but with the subtle chime of a notification on Mark's work laptop. We were both working from home that day, a rare, cozy instance of domestic togetherness that now, in retrospect, felt sickeningly fake. I was sorting through expense reports on the kitchen island, and Mark was in the living room, ostensibly preparing for a budget presentation. He'd gone to grab coffee, leaving his laptop open on the couch. That's the moment the chime went off. It was an instant message pop-up from his company's internal messaging system. The name on the sender was Chloe. My first reaction was professional curiosity. Was she still hassling him about that budget? I told myself I was just going to close the window. But the subject line, visible even in the small preview box, stopped my hand midair. It read simply, "Last night was crazy. Can we talk about those fiscal responsibilities again? Winky face. The winky face. That little, cartoonishly flirtatious emoticon was the pin that punctured the dam of my 10-year marriage. It wasn't just a friendly chat about numbers. Last night was crazy. Mark had told me he was working late at the office, dealing with a server issue. I'd even stayed up and microwaved him a late dinner when he finally got home at 11 p.m. I didn't hesitate. The HR professional in me, the one who deals with evidence and documentation, took over completely. My hands didn't shake. My breathing didn't hitch. I moved with a terrifying calm, the kind of stillness you feel just before a hurricane hits. I opened the message thread. It was a rapid-fire exchange spanning weeks, disguised in the corporate chat interface but loaded with graphic, undeniable details. They talked about meeting in the unused conference room on the 15th floor, about weekend business trips to neighboring cities that Mark had actually told me were solo fishing excursions, and yes, about Chloe coming over to our house once while I was at an HR convention. The messages weren't sloppy or emotional, they were transactional, almost clinical in their arrangement of logistics and shared physical desire. That lack of emotional depth, the pure focus on the logistics of the deception, somehow hurt more than passionate declarations of love would have. It reduced my 10-year commitment to a logistical inconvenience they had to work around. They even had a code phrase for when the coast was clear. The Q3 projections are ready for review. It was disgusting, corporate speak for something intensely intimate. I spent the next 20 minutes in a state of hyperfocus, taking screenshots of everything. Not just the graphic parts, but the parts where they discussed me. Chloe had referred to me as the warden. Mark had replied with a weak, "Don't be mean." She's stressed with the promotion. The defense was pathetic, but the fact that I was already a barrier, an obstacle in their narrative, solidified my resolve. They didn't see me as a wife. They saw me as a problem to be solved, or worse, someone to be placated. When I finally shut the laptop, the silence in the room was deafening. I could hear the rain tapping on the window, the distant sound of Bentley snoring in the hall. Mark was still out of the room. The world hadn't stopped spinning. There was no theatrical explosion of rage. Instead, a bone-deep coldness settled over me. It was the feeling of your entire life fracturing internally while the outside shell remains perfectly intact. I didn't cry. Crying was an option for the weak, for the women who lost control. I had a department to run, a promotion to utilize, and now, a deep, abiding need for justice. I realized in that moment that confronting them immediately would be a waste. It would give them the satisfaction of drama. It would allow Mark to beg, Chloe to deny, and me to lose my strategic advantage in a messy, emotional outburst. I was Freya the fixer, and this was the biggest, most personal conflict resolution case of my career. I needed to approach it with the same level of calculated detachment I brought to $1 million contract dispute. I walked into the bathroom, looked at my reflection, and saw a woman I barely recognized. The eyes were harder, the mouth set in a thin, determined line. I took a deep breath, smoothing down my shirt and running a hand through my hair. I walked back out to the kitchen island, finished the expense reports, and waited for Mark to return. When he walked in, carrying 2 mugs of coffee, he looked completely normal, completely innocent. "Sorry, hon, the line was slow. I was just about to dive into Q3 projections." He smiled and handed me my mug. "Oh," I said, taking the mug. My voice was level, almost unnervingly calm. "Is that Chloe's phrase for working late now?" His smile didn't fade, not even slightly. He missed the subtle barb completely, demonstrating the depth of his carelessness. "Something like that. Budget season, you know. Hey, did you manage to get that report finished?" I smiled back, a genuine, terrifyingly false smile. "All done. Everything is under control." And that was the choice I made, control. I decided to live alongside the betrayal, to sleep next to the liar, and to work with the other woman, all while pretending I knew nothing. I needed the time to secure my promotion, solidify my power base in the office, and orchestrate the perfect maneuver. My pain was real, a constant, dull ache beneath my ribs, but I buried it deep. It was fuel. It was the energy I needed to climb the final rung of the corporate ladder and set my trap. The shock was over. The planning had begun. My husband and his young lover were about to discover that in the HR department, the biggest mistake you can make is underestimating the person who holds all the personnel files. The promotion wasn't a sudden burst of luck. It was a symphony of strategic planning I had been conducting for over a year. But once the betrayal became my secret, the goal of department had shifted from a career aspiration to a necessary weapon. That title, that level of administrative authority over transfers and personnel, was the only way to get Chloe exactly where I wanted her. Isolated, vulnerable, and professionally obligated to serve me. The 3 months between the discovery of the affair and the official announcement of my promotion were the most disciplined, most unnaturally focused period of my entire career. I had to become a machine. I had to compartmentalize my raging, gut-wrenching pain and transform it into rocket fuel for ambition. Every late night, every perfect presentation, every strategic alliance I built was no longer for a bonus or a title. It was a nail in Mark's and Chloe's coffin of deception. My immediate superior, the retiring department head, was a man named Richard. Richard was a creature of habit and procedure, deeply weary of the HR drama. He needed a successor who was not only competent but predictable, someone who wouldn't rock the boat. I used the existing, mundane conflicts in the office as my proving ground. Remember that difficult situation with the sales director who was constantly abusing his expense account? Instead of firing him, which would have been messy, I engineered a lateral move to a less powerful role in a satellite office, framed as a new opportunity for growth. I fixed the problem quietly, professionally, and Richard was immensely relieved. Freya the fixer was back, operating at peak performance. I started taking on extra projects that specifically dealt with cross-departmental structuring, laying the subtle groundwork for the internal transfer authority I would soon wield. I created flowcharts and detailed documentation for streamlining interdepartmental assistance support, even floating the idea of an executive pool, a concept I knew Richard would love because it sounded efficient. The entire purpose of this executive pool concept was to make Chloe's forced transfer into my personal assistant role seem like a logical, cost-saving, corporate decision, rather than a malicious act of revenge. During this time, I had to interact with Mark constantly, and that was the hardest part. At home, I maintained a chillingly normal facade. I cooked dinner, asked about his day, and even initiated intimacy a few times, just to confirm his deception, and to ensure he had absolutely no suspicion of my knowledge or my plans. Every touch, every conversation felt like a performance of the highest order. I had to look at the man who was lying to me, the man who was making my life a mockery, and smile genuinely. The emotional toll was immense, but the clarity of my goal kept me steady. My mantra became, don't react. Wait for the leverage. At the office, Mark would often swing by my old cubicle. He knew I was interviewing for the head role. He was supportive, in his oblivious way. You've got this, Freya, he'd say, leaning against the doorframe. You're the smartest person in that whole department. You deserve it. I'd just smile and say, thanks, honey. It's a lot of work, but the authority that comes with it will be worth it. He thought I meant the authority to make more money or hire better staff. I meant the authority to destroy him and his mistress. And Chloe. Our interactions became part of my data collection. I noticed she would sometimes linger near Mark's desk after meetings, or they'd share a quick, conspiratorial glance across the cafeteria. I stored those moments away, cataloging them, ensuring I had enough proof to justify my actions later, should I ever need to explain myself to anyone other than my own conscience. She was still just Chloe from marketing, unaware that her fate was being meticulously sealed by the woman she was actively betraying. She'd occasionally ask about the promotion process, perhaps sensing a shift in the corporate landscape. Must be intense, Freya, she said one afternoon by the water cooler. A lot of pressure. It is, I agreed, taking a slow sip of water. But I'm ready for it. I know exactly how I'd run things. The key is total control over personnel assignments. That's how you ensure efficiency, right? She nodded, completely missing the chilling double meaning. Totally. You'd be great. When Richard finally made the official announcement, Freya Hayes will be taking over as department head of employee relations, effective immediately, the satisfaction was a physical, electric surge. I didn't celebrate publicly. I simply accepted the congratulations with a reserved, professional grace. My colleagues saw an ambitious woman finally reaching the height of her power. Only I knew the real reason for the relentless drive. The promotion wasn't the reward, it was the tool. The very next week, I initiated the paperwork for the executive assistant role I had cooked up. I needed someone sharp, quick, and familiar with the company's inner workings. The internal memo I drafted specifically mentioned targeting high-potential employees from other departments for a developmental transfer. It was perfectly vague, perfectly corporate. I made sure Richard signed off on it before he cleared out his desk. Then, I executed the transfer request. Chloe, from marketing, to my department, as my direct executive assistant. I didn't need to consult Mark. I didn't need to justify it to anyone outside of the HR systems, which I now controlled. It was done with a click of the mouse, the professional equivalent of detonating a bomb. She was now under my domain, subject to my rules, and entirely dependent on my professional goodwill. My pain had been transformed into an impenetrable shield of professionalism, and my patience was about to pay off in the sweetest, most vindictive way possible. The game had officially begun. The transfer paperwork was signed, sealed, and delivered, but the real show began the morning Chloe had to officially report to her new office, my department. The feeling wasn't triumph. It was a tight, cold coil of anticipation in my stomach. I had orchestrated this. Now I had to perform the role of the benevolent, slightly detached boss who saw potential where everyone else saw gossip. The HR department is built on gossip, and believe me, this move set the internal chat channels on fire. A young, promising marketing analyst suddenly moved to an executive assistant role in HR? It screamed restructuring or reprimand, but no one could quite pin it down. That ambiguity was my best shield. Chloe arrived looking perfectly professional, but visibly strained. She wore a sharp, navy blazer and a hesitant expression. Her usual breezy confidence was gone, replaced by a guarded stiffness. When she came into my newly refurbished office, the one with the massive glass wall, she didn't meet my eyes immediately. I was already seated, scrolling through a document, the picture of focused industry. "Good morning, Chloe. Welcome aboard," I said, my voice warm and purely managerial. I didn't stand up. I didn't extend a hand. I kept the distance professional and insurmountable. "Good morning, Freya." "Thank you," she replied, her voice a little too quiet. She didn't sound grateful. She sounded like a prisoner reporting for duty. I gestured to the desk I had personally assigned her. It wasn't one of the plush, enclosed assistant stations. I had her move to a sleek, minimalist desk directly outside my glass office, a position of high visibility and zero privacy. Everyone walking past my office, including Mark when he came up for meetings, would see her sitting there. I had ensured her new location was the ultimate expression of my power. She was now under my thumb, literally and physically within my line of sight at all times. As you know, the executive assistant role is a new initiative I began, launching into the corporate script I had memorized. It's a high-level development role meant to give you a 360-degree view of executive function. You'll be managing my calendar, overseeing interdepartmental documentation flow, and handling high-stakes personal assignments like the one we discussed yesterday. I paused, letting the implication of the anniversary trip assignment settle like dust. Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I'm looking forward to the challenge, Freya. I was a little surprised by the transfer. This was the moment for the layered conflict to begin, the chance to establish my plausible deniability. I smiled sadly, leaning forward, giving her a brief, manufactured moment of faux intimacy. "I know, Chloe. Look, I fought for this transfer. You're too smart to be stuck just running reports and marketing. I saw your aptitude for detail and organization. We're an HR department. We recognize talent," I said, hitting that word with just the right amount of sincerity. But frankly, they resisted the move. They saw it as losing one of their best. "So, you need to prove them wrong. This role isn't for slackers. I need impeccable performance, especially on personal tasks. Because if this doesn't work out, it reflects badly on my judgment, and then, well, we'll have to revisit your future here." It was a perfect psychological trap. I framed the demotion as a promotion, the punishment as an opportunity. And most importantly, I made her success or failure entirely dependent on my satisfaction. If she failed, it wouldn't be because I was cruel. It would be because she wasn't good enough for the opportunity I'd given her. The internal pressure I was placing on her, leveraging her own professional ambition against her guilt, was my masterpiece. I then handed her the first physical task of the day, a stack of disorganized files. This is a backlog of compensation files from the last quarter. I need them indexed, audited for compliance, and summarized into a 5-page presentation by end of day. Use your marketing skills, make it pop, and after that, you can start on the anniversary trip research. I want those 3 distinct proposals on my desk by Monday. Her eyes widened at the sheer volume of the work, but she simply nodded, accepting the impossible workload with a strange, passive resignation. She gathered the files, the very files that contained highly sensitive data about our coworkers, data she was now privy to, under my supervision, and walked over to her desk. The rest of the morning was a study in controlled tension. Every time I looked up from my computer, I could see her. She was the mistress, now my subordinate, sitting 10 feet away, meticulously logging data about the company's compliance breaches and simultaneously researching the most romantic, exclusive resorts for my husband and me. She would occasionally look up, and our eyes would meet through the glass. Mine were always neutral, professional, demanding. Hers were a complex mix of fear, guilt, and a growing, silent hatred. Around noon, Mark walked past my office, heading for a meeting with my deputy. He stopped dead when he saw Chloe at the desk. His face went through 3 distinct phases: confusion, surprise, and then a flash of fear that he quickly tried to mask with a broad, corporate smile. "Chloe, what are you doing here?" he asked, trying to sound casual, as if finding the woman he was sleeping with relocated to his wife's office was a common occurrence. Chloe, already halfway into my revenge plot, rose smoothly. "Hi, Mark. Freya created a new executive assistant role, and I transferred over from marketing. I'm her new EA, just helping with some compliance work." Mark turned to me, his smile fixed and slightly twitchy. "Wow, Freya. That's a big change. Great move for her, I guess." I glanced up from my screen, putting on the perfect mask of the busy, slightly harried boss. "Thanks, honey. She's great. Very organized. In fact, she's already researching our anniversary trip. She's going to make it amazing." Mark's eyes darted from my face to Chloe's. Chloe looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Mark just managed a strangled, "That's fantastic," before beating a hasty retreat down the hall. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken communication. Chloe and I were alone in our terrible secret, bound by the professional cage I had created. She knew I knew. She just didn't know how much I knew, or what my endgame was. And until she figured it out, she had to sit there, right outside my door, planning the perfect romantic getaway for the man she was sleeping with and the wife who now owned her professional life. This was the start of the deep dive, and she was already sinking. The anniversary trip planning was only the most glaring piece of the puzzle. My true weapon was the relentless, soul-crushing professional workload I heaped onto Chloe's desk. I didn't want her to just feel guilty. I wanted her to feel incompetent, overwhelmed, and completely stripped of the self-assured confidence she usually possessed. I maintained a facade of unwavering professional courtesy. I was never harsh, never yelled, and always said please and thank you. But the content and deadlines of the tasks I assigned were designed to be impossible. Remember how I said my job was about strategy and control? I leveraged my deep knowledge of the company's internal weaknesses and administrative bottlenecks to create true sinkholes of work for her. The first impossible task, after the compensation files, was the historical policy audit. I told her that, as the new department head, I needed a complete review of every HR policy enacted in the last 5 years, cross-referenced with employee feedback data to identify compliance gaps and areas of low morale. This sounds simple, but I knew the truth. The company's digital archive system was a nightmare of broken links and mislabeled documents. It was a task designed to send her into a digital labyrinth with no map. "This is a high-stakes task, Chloe," I explained, leaning back in my chair, watching her from behind the glass wall. "It will show me your ability to deal with ambiguity and complexity. I need a comprehensive, color-coded report by Friday. No excuses. I trust your judgment on this." She worked late every night that week. I could hear the faint click of her mouse and the occasional frustrated sigh bleeding through the glass. Mark would text me, asking why Chloe was still there at 8 p.m. Mark, is Chloe pulling another late one? Budget issues again. Freya, no honey. She's working on a massive compliance audit for me. She's very dedicated. I told her to take a break, but she insists on perfecting it. Great work ethic. The lie was perfect because it simultaneously praised Chloe's professionalism, making Mark feel slightly guilty for distracting her with their secret life, while also justifying my long hours at the office, where I was often just sitting there, enjoying the view of her misery. Then there were the small, sensory details designed to chip away at her composure. I became incredibly particular about my coffee. Not just the blend, but the precise temperature, the exact ratio of milk to sugar, and the specific stoneware mug I preferred. Every morning, I'd send her on an elaborate, often contradictory search for a niche brand of oat milk the office didn't stock. If the coffee was a single degree off, I wouldn't complain loudly. I'd simply smile, thank her, and leave the untouched cup cooling on my desk, ensuring she saw it when she came in later. The silent disapproval was far more potent than any outburst. The anniversary trip planning was still her primary source of internal agony. I would schedule trip review sessions every Tuesday, always inviting Mark to attend. Mark was genuinely excited. He was completely oblivious to the exquisite tension in the room, constantly offering input with a boyish enthusiasm that only twisted the knife deeper into Chloe. "Oh, the private island resort in the Maldives looks incredible, Chloe," Mark said during one session, pointing at the glossy brochure she'd procured. "Can you imagine, Freya? Just us. Complete isolation." Chloe, who had spent the weekend detailing the 5-course dinner menu and private snorkeling excursions for us, had to sit there and nod, looking professionally pleased. I would then turn to her and say, in the warmest possible tone, "Chloe, darling, did you remember to coordinate the personalized turn-down service? I want a different love note from Mark on the pillow every night. You'll need to work with him on the content for those. Make sure they're genuinely romantic." Mark would flush a little, embarrassed by the public discussion of love notes, and Chloe would go pale. The task required her to actively, intimately collaborate with the man she was sleeping with on a public declaration of his love for his wife. It was the ultimate humiliation, forcing her to professionally facilitate the symbol of the very relationship she was undermining. Her presentation for the historical policy audit was flawed. Naturally, it was 100 pages long, filled with beautiful graphics, but missing 3 crucial documents I knew were impossible to find. I didn't get angry. I simply said, "This is excellent work, Chloe. The design is superb. However, we have a significant compliance issue here." I circled the missing data points in red pen. "I need you to fix this and update the presentation. Put a rush on it, please. I have a board meeting on Monday." She had 3 days to redo a week's worth of impossible research. The stress was physically changing her. Her messy bun was messier, her dark circles were pronounced, and she was dropping weight. I felt no remorse. I felt only the cold, focused satisfaction of a strategy working exactly as planned. Her professional life, the thing she took so much pride in, was becoming a living hell, and she had to maintain a pleasant, professional demeanor through all of it. This was the core of my revenge, not an emotional explosion, but a systematic, professional dismantling of her life, making her a slave to my schedule and my marriage. The next phase involved Mark, whose confusion over this entire situation was starting to bubble up into outright guilt and paranoia. He couldn't understand why his wife was suddenly spending so much time praising his mistress's work ethic, forcing them together in these strange, intimate professional scenarios. And that confusion was exactly what I was counting on. My home life during this period became a secondary, more intimate stage for my revenge play. I was operating under the constant, exhausting surveillance of my own husband, Mark. He was deeply confused, and that confusion, mixed with his palpable guilt, was the key ingredient that kept him off balance and prevented him from guessing my true motives. He wasn't dealing with a hysterical wife. He was dealing with Freya, the department head, and she was too professionally cold to be questioned. Mark's confusion was genuine. He expected an explosion, a fight, or at the very least, a shift in my demeanor towards him. Instead, I was unnervingly normal, perhaps even nicer than usual. But when it came to Chloe, I was a brick wall of corporate professionalism. This juxtaposition, sweet, attentive wife at home, ice cold, demanding boss at the office, was tearing at his peace of mind. He started testing the waters, little subtle probes into my mental state. "Freya, are you okay with Chloe being your assistant?" he asked one evening as we were washing dishes. He held a plate under the running water, not quite looking at me. "I mean, I know you two were friendly, but it's a big shift in dynamic. Why wouldn't I be okay?" I replied, keeping my voice light, stacking the clean dishes. "She's excellent, incredibly fast at research, and her marketing background gives her a flair for presentations. She's exactly what I need for a high-impact role like this. Plus, she's dedicated. She's been pulling some serious hours on the compliance audit." The words were genuine praise, but delivered with the detached sincerity of an HR performance review. It shut him down immediately. He couldn't protest that I was being cruel to his mistress because I was constantly praising her work ethic. He couldn't suggest I was suspicious because I was the one who personally hired her. All he could feel was the growing weight of his own deception, amplified by my bizarre, unwavering trust in Chloe's competence. His guilt manifested in physical ways. He became jumpy every time his phone buzzed. He started overcompensating at home, bringing me flowers unexpectedly, offering to walk Bentley the Labrador twice a day, and initiating conversations about buying a new, bigger house. These were his attempts at atonement for the secret he thought I didn't know. The moments when Chloe's work intersected with our home life were the most agonizing for him. He and I would be watching a movie, and my work phone would ping with a late-night email from her. "Who's that?" he'd ask, his voice betraying a hint of anxiety. "Oh, it's just Chloe. Finalizing the travel insurance details for the anniversary trip," I'd say, scrolling through the document. "She found us this fantastic bespoke insurance package that covers private helicopter evacuation from the island. See, total dedication to detail. She's really ensuring our trip is flawless." The sheer audacity of the situation, his mistress ensuring his safety on a romantic getaway with his wife, was a level of psychological warfare I knew he couldn't handle. It forced him to confront the dual reality he had created. At work, he was interacting with a high-performing colleague whom his wife trusted implicitly. In reality, that colleague was the proof of his betrayal, and he couldn't say a single word about it without confessing everything. I began to observe him more closely. I realized he was treating Chloe with an almost exaggerated coldness at the office. If he had to talk to her, which was often, thanks to the anniversary trip planning, he'd keep the conversation curt, strictly professional, and always within earshot of other colleagues. He was terrified that a moment of familiarity would accidentally slip out in front of me or someone else. He was sacrificing his secret comfort with Chloe to protect his home life with me. I was starving their relationship of any oxygen, both at work and at home, using the mask of professionalism as my suffocating agent. One night, he came home clearly rattled. He slammed his briefcase down a little too hard on the kitchen counter. "Long day?" I asked sweetly. He nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, I had to sit in on another one of those trip planning meetings with you and Chloe. She's really going overboard, isn't she? Those resort options are insane. Do we really need a private butler?" "Yes, we do," I said firmly. "It's our 10-year anniversary mark. We deserve to be spoiled. And I told Chloe to aim high. I want this trip to feel like the start of our next chapter. A reaffirmation." I smiled, using that loaded word, knowing it was the last thing he wanted to think about. "You two seem to be working really well together, by the way. Very professional. I appreciate how seriously you're taking this, even with your budget deadline." He just stared at me for a long minute. His eyes were heavy, filled with a deep, unsettling fatigue that wasn't about work. It was the crushing exhaustion of maintaining a lie. "You know, Freya," he finally said, his voice low, "sometimes I feel like you're testing me." That was the closest he had come to the truth. My heart gave a sharp, involuntary kick against my ribs, but my face remained perfectly serene. "Testing you, honey? Why would I test you?" I chuckled softly, walking over and placing a reassuring hand on his arm. "I trust you completely. I trust your judgment, and I trust that you want this marriage to succeed as much as I do." Now, stop worrying about the butler, and let's go over the dinner reservation list Chloe sent. She's booked us a table at that new French place downtown. It sounds divine. I gave him an out, a chance to confess, to stop the game. But his guilt was too paralyzing, and my professional facade was too impenetrable. He chose to retreat into the lie, accepting the anxiety of the situation rather than facing the truth. He didn't realize that by continuing to play the happy husband and supportive boss, he was simply sealing his own fate. The tension was now at a boiling point, ready for the spectacular burst that was the anniversary trip presentation itself. The day of the anniversary trip presentation arrived with the oppressive stillness of a pressure cooker waiting to explode. I scheduled it for 4 p.m. on a Friday, ensuring it was the final, inescapable task before the weekend, a little something for Chloe and Mark to chew on for 48 hours. The setting was my office, the massive glass wall framing the city skyline as our backdrop. I had a small table set up with crystal water glasses and a plate of expensive, untouched artisanal cookies. The atmosphere was deliberately sterile, a corporate stage for a deeply personal betrayal. Mark arrived first, looking rumpled but excited, carrying a list of his own suggestions, totally oblivious to the minefield he was about to enter. "I'm telling you, Freya, a private beach dinner is a must," he was saying, oblivious. "We'll see what Chloe has put together," I replied, my voice crisp. Chloe walked in precisely at 4 p.m. She was a ghost of her former self. The stress had peaked, and her professionalism was the only thing holding her together. She carried a sleek, branded travel folder and a laptop. This wasn't a casual chat, this was a formal presentation. She had to stand before the man she was sleeping with and the wife who knew everything, and sell them on the fantasy of their enduring love. "Thank you both for meeting," Chloe began, her voice tight but unwavering. She clicked on her presentation. The first slide was titled, "A Decade of Devotion, Mark and Freya's 10-Year Reaffirmation." The title alone was a cruel joke. She began with itinerary option 1, the seclusion package. She spoke about a private villa in the Seychelles. This package, which I personally negotiated with the resort's concierge, includes a dedicated, non-English speaking staff to ensure total privacy. She clicked to a slide, showing a ridiculously opulent, 4-poster bed draped in mosquito netting, overlooking a turquoise ocean. The master suite, as per Freya's specific request, offers a spectacular view for optimal connection. I met Chloe's eyes as she said the word connection. Her face didn't flinch, but I saw the pain in her eyes, a flicker of acknowledgement that she understood the dark, loaded meaning behind every single word she was forced to utter. Mark, meanwhile, was beaming. "Look at that, Freya. That's exactly what I was imagining." He reached over and squeezed my hand. I squeezed back, a gesture of conjugal solidarity that I knew felt like a burning vice grip to Chloe. She then moved on to the personalized details, which I had insisted upon. The second phase of the trip is focused on shared memory creation. I've compiled a chronological photo album of your relationship, sourced from your shared private cloud. Mark stiffened. He hadn't realized she had gone that deep into our personal history. He must have been terrified she'd stumbled upon the few photos they'd risked taking together, which will be waiting in the room upon arrival. Chloe continued smoothly, like a professional tour guide leading a trip through hell. I've also coordinated the Love Note program. Mark, you will find 10 unique, personalized notes left throughout the villa each day, pre-written by you and discreetly placed by the staff. We work together to ensure the sentiment of each note reflects your enduring passion. We work together. I could see the sweat forming faintly on Mark's brow. He remembered those late-night, panicked texting sessions with Chloe, trying to craft saccharine, believable love notes for his wife, all while trying to maintain the charade with both of us. The irony was so thick you could choke on it. He looked like a puppet whose strings were being pulled in contradictory directions, and I, the master puppeteer, was enjoying every moment. I jumped in, my tone full of delight. "Oh, Chloe, that's just perfect. Mark's notes are always so sweet. You did a wonderful job capturing his voice. Tell us about the catamaran trip you planned for option 3. The third option was the most expensive, a chartered, fully crewed yacht cruise around the Greek islands. It required even more meticulous planning, menus, logistics, crew background checks. As she presented the details of the vessel, the captain's credentials, and the suggested itinerary, including a secluded cove perfect for a midnight swim, Mark finally reached his breaking point, though quietly. He interrupted, running a hand through his hair. Wait. The cost on this third one, Chloe. It's a little excessive, isn't it? Freya, honey, do we really need a crude yacht? Maybe we should dial it back. It's too much. This was him, not the finance man worrying about the budget, but the guilty man worrying about the spectacle. He wanted the trip scaled back, less opulent, less meaningful, so the celebration of our 10 years wouldn't feel so agonizingly real. I turned to him, my smile glacial. Mark, you know how hard I worked for this promotion. We earned this. And Chloe has poured her heart into this. She has been relentless in finding the absolute best way for us to celebrate our commitment. We are not dialing it back. I then turned back to Chloe, my professional gratitude on full display. Chloe, they're all excellent. Truly flawless. I want you to go ahead and book option 3, the yacht in Greece. And make sure you confirm all the details, especially the Love No program. I need the final confirmation, including all booking codes and concierge contacts, on my desk first thing Monday morning. No slip-ups. Chloe looked straight at me, her face pale but determined. Understood, Freya. Flawless. She packed up her laptop and rushed out, leaving Mark sitting there, staring at the glossy picture of the yacht, a look of sheer, horrified realization dawning in his eyes. He couldn't hide the truth from himself anymore. This was not a professional coincidence. He just didn't know yet why I was doing it. The intensity of the forced intimacy, the public acknowledgement of my trust in both of them, had finally cracked his composure. The next move was Chloe's, and the mounting tension meant she wouldn't stay silent for long. The break came on Monday morning, exactly as I had planned. The weekend had done its job. Mark was stewing in guilt, and Chloe was trapped in the realization that she had just spent 48 hours confirming our anniversary trip details. She walked in that morning looking haggard, like she hadn't slept, carrying the final yacht confirmation folder like a casket. I was in my office, sipping the coffee she had meticulously prepared, the exact right temperature, the perfect blend. I didn't look up immediately when she appeared at my door, standing rigid and pale. Good morning, Chloe, I said, my voice cheerful, still scrolling through emails. Do you have the confirmations for the Greek trip? Yes, Freya. Everything is confirmed, she said, her voice dangerously flat. She placed the folder on my desk, not with the usual professional slide, but with a slight, deliberate thud. The yacht is booked, the crew is vetted, and the 21 love notes are digitally categorized for daily placement. I finally looked up, letting my eyes meet hers. There was no professional mask left. Her eyes were red-rimmed, full of raw fury and fear. The professional veneer had completely cracked. Excellent work, Chloe. Flawless, I praised, pulling the folder toward me. See, I knew you were the right person for this high-stakes role. Detail-oriented, resourceful, and dedicated. That was the word that broke her. Dedicated. She leaned forward, placing her hands flat on my desk, her knuckles white. She didn't raise her voice, but the intensity in her whisper was more piercing than any scream. Stop it, Freya. Stop it right now, she hissed. I raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, the picture of managerial confusion. Stop what, Chloe? I don't understand. Are you feeling overwhelmed by the workload? We can certainly discuss prioritizing the policy audit. You know exactly what I mean, she whispered fiercely, looking quickly through the glass wall to ensure no one was listening, a pointless gesture since the door was closed. This isn't a developmental role. This is a punishment. You transferred me, demoted me, and you're making me plan your 10-year anniversary with Mark. The trip I know you both chose because it was where he first proposed to you. Callback. I love that she remembered that detail. It meant she had been paying attention to our lives, even while trying to destroy them. It added another layer of delicious guilt to the mix. I leaned back slowly, allowing a small, cold smile to finally touch my lips. The game of pretense was over. This was the moment of the direct confrontation, and I was ready. You're right, Chloe. It's beautiful, isn't it? The Cyclades are just stunning in October, I said, my voice dropping its professional warmth, becoming sharp and metallic. You're an HR assistant now, Chloe. You perform the tasks assigned to you flawlessly, and planning this trip is your primary task. But why? She pleaded, her voice cracking. I can take the demotion. I can take the workload. But this is cruel. Why are you doing this to me? Do you know? She cut herself off, still unable to speak the words. Do you know about me and Mark? Do I know what, Chloe? I prompted sweetly. Do I know that you were one of the most promising analysts in the marketing department? Yes. Do I know that you have exceptional taste in luxury travel? Absolutely. Do I know that you need to be constantly tested to reach your potential? Clearly. I stood up then, walking around the desk to stand directly in front of her, forcing her to look up at me. My height advantage and my department head power suit suddenly felt enormous and suffocating in the small office. Let me be perfectly clear, I said, my voice low and final. You asked why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because I can. I'm doing this because your betrayal, and Mark's, was an act of professional sloppiness and personal disrespect. You broke a contract, the unspoken one of mutual respect in a workplace. And in HR, breaches of conduct have consequences. I could see the realization dawn in her eyes, the moment she understood that I hadn't been an idiot, but a predator who had waited for the perfect tactical advantage. The color drained from her face, leaving her ghost white. You knew, she stammered. The whole time. You knew about Mark and me, and you transferred me anyway. You promoted me to your assistant. I did, I confirmed, reaching out and picking up the yacht folder. I tapped the cover gently. This trip, Chloe, isn't about celebrating a marriage. It's about documenting its perfect illusion. And you, my dear assistant, are the chief documentarian. Every flawless detail you confirmed, every expensive reservation you made, every romantic note you coordinated, it's all on paper. It's evidence. It's irrefutable proof of the immense effort I put into maintaining this life, and your own complicity in trying to shatter it. Her eyes filled with tears, not of remorse, but of total, crushing defeat. What do you want, Freya? Just fire me. I can't do this anymore. I can't sit outside your office and plan your life. Fire you? Oh no. That's messy. And you're too valuable right now, I smiled. I want you to finish what you started, Chloe. I want you to feel the full weight of what you try to take from me. And then, I will decide your next task. I handed her a thick packet of divorce documents that I had already prepared with my lawyer, subtly placing them beneath the yacht confirmation folder. Here's the final piece of documentation I need you to file. It's confidential, so handle it with extreme discretion. I'll need these finalized by the end of the day. Get to work. She stared at the folder, then back at me. I hadn't lost my temper. I hadn't screamed or thrown things. I had simply turned her professional life into the instrument of her psychological torture, and now she was faced with the ultimate logistical task, finalizing the dissolution of the marriage she helped destroy. She picked up the folder, her body trembling, and walked out of my office and back to her desk, not as my colleague, not as my rival, but as my utterly broken, meticulously professional assistant. The stage was now set for the final, devastating confrontation with Mark. The confrontation with Mark wasn't a sudden ambush. It was the final, scheduled meeting on my personal calendar. I set the stage that evening at home. The setting wasn't the bedroom or the living room. Those were too emotional. It was the kitchen island, the same spot where the whole, terrible truth had been revealed by Chloe's message months ago. I made sure the space was clean, empty, and well lit. There was no alcohol, no background music, just silence. Mark came home late, exhausted. He was clearly rattled from his interactions at the office. He had seen Chloe's misery and my cold detachment, and he had spent the day waiting for the bomb to drop. He looked less like a corporate numbers man and more like a teenager caught stealing. Hey, Han, he mumbled, dropping his briefcase by the door. Long day. You wouldn't believe the stress Chloe is under with that yacht booking. She seems really fragile. He was still trying to test the waters, fishing for a reaction. I was already seated at the island, waiting. I had prepared 2 objects, the folder containing the final yacht confirmation details and the thick, signed, and notarized divorce papers. I slid them both onto the island's granite surface. Sit down, Mark, I said. My voice was utterly devoid of emotion, the practiced tone of an HR professional delivering bad news at a performance review. We need to talk about the final logistics of the anniversary trip and a necessary restructuring of our marital agreement. He paused, sensing the shift. This wasn't the cheerful, falsely sweet Freya he had been dealing with. This was a different beast altogether. He pulled up a stool, his eyes darting between the two folders. The trip's set, right? Chloe said it was flawless, he said, trying to anchor the conversation in the familiar illusion. Flawless? Yes, I confirmed. I picked up the yacht confirmation folder, opening it to show him the intricate details, the private cabin layout, the crew itinerary, the bespoke menus. She did a magnificent job, didn't she? 2 weeks on a chartered yacht in the Cyclades. The reaffirmation trip. She even personally coordinated the love notes you wrote for me. That required immense dedication. I let the word dedication hang there, a pointed barb. I watched as the color drained from his face for the final time. The game was up, and he knew it. Freya, he started, his voice thick with the beginnings of a stammering confession. I cut him off, raising my hand. Don't waste my time with apologies or explanations. I'm not angry, Mark. I'm disappointed in your lack of professionalism. You were sloppy. You were arrogant, and you completely underestimated my intelligence. I leaned in, meeting his terrified gaze. I've known about you and Chloe for 3 months. I found the messages on your laptop the day you told me you were working late on Q3 projections. I knew everything. His jaw went slack. The raw shock on his face was the most genuine emotion I had seen from him in years. You knew, and you didn't say anything. Why, Freya? Why did you make me? Why did I make you book the anniversary trip with her? I finished his sentence coldly. Because I needed leverage. I needed control. And I needed to see just how far your commitment to your lie would take you. I explained it to him, not as a scorned wife, but as a strategist outlining a perfect plan. When I found out I had 2 options: explode, lose my dignity, and risk my career by creating a workplace scandal. Or I could wait, secure my promotion, gain the power to isolate your mistress, and then, slowly and meticulously, use her professional existence to facilitate the perfect ending to our marriage. I slid the divorce papers across the island toward him. This is the result of my strategic waiting. The yacht is booked. The trip is non-refundable. Chloe spent a week securing the highest-end, most personalized package, which, thanks to her flawless documentation, is fully transferable. The trip will now serve as my solo fresh start vacation. His eyes finally focused on the divorce papers. You're divorcing me. You already filed. You're just telling me now, after all that. I am, I confirmed. And here's the best part. Thanks to your insistence on making the trip so extravagantly expensive and your personal involvement in its planning, the financial settlement is now remarkably clean. You get the house and the debts. I get the yacht trip, the full value of the non-refundable reservations, and a very quick, uncontested settlement. I secured all of this without raising my voice, without damaging my professional reputation, and without giving you or Chloe the satisfaction of my tears. The confrontation was about facts, not feelings. I dissected his betrayal like a business deal gone sour. He wasn't even fighting it. He was just staring at the sheer, calculated brutality of my plan. And Chloe, he finally whispered. What happens to her? I smiled, a genuine, powerful, victorious smile. Chloe's fate is currently in my hands. Her professional record under my supervision is immaculate, but her emotional state is a liability. She will be handling her final, and most humiliating, task tomorrow. A task that involves both of us, and which will secure the final closure I require. I stood up, the meeting concluded. The documents are self-explanatory. My lawyer will contact your lawyer tomorrow morning. You have 48 hours to vacate the master bedroom. I need space to pack for my trip. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a final presentation to prepare for tomorrow morning. I walked away from the island, leaving him with the 2 symbols of his undoing, the proof of the expensive, failed fantasy, and the quiet, undeniable reality of his new single life. He hadn't just lost a wife, he had been comprehensively defeated by his department head, and the taste of that defeat was far more bitter than any emotional breakup. I had traded my pain for power, and now I was ready to use that power for the final, public act of closure. The final act of my revenge required not just cruelty, but theater. I needed a public, undeniable moment of closure that would simultaneously humiliate Chloe and formally end my marital contract with Mark, all under the guise of corporate normalcy. The tool for this was the fresh start party. The morning after my icy confrontation with Mark, I called Chloe into my office. She looked terrible, the weight of the yacht confirmation, the love notes, and the hidden divorce papers finally breaking her. "Chloe, I have your final project," I announced, ignoring her ravaged appearance. "It's a major logistical undertaking, but I know you're up to it." I leaned across the desk, my voice carrying the light, excited tone of a boss offering a high-profile opportunity. The company is celebrating the new organizational structure, specifically the success of the HR department under my new leadership. I want to host an office-wide Fresh Start networking event. It needs to be the event of the quarter. High-end catering, open bar, a short presentation, the works. I watched her face as she processed the request. She probably thought this was a chance for redemption, a way to move past the awful personal tasks. But I was about to give the knife one final, precise twist. "You will be the lead coordinator," I continued. "Budget is generous. I need the invites sent out by noon, and the entire event must be ready by 5 p.m. today. It needs to be an impeccable celebration of new beginnings." She finally looked a little relieved, the professional event planner in her taking over. "By 5 p.m. today? That's tight, Freya, but I can do it. What's the presentation for?" "It's a brief, highly personal address I'll be giving," I said, handing her a printed PowerPoint slide. "This is the final slide of my presentation. I need you to ensure it's projected clearly on the main screen the moment I finish speaking. Double-check the resolution, please." The slide was clean, white text on a black background. It read, "Our official fresh start. Freya Hayes is pleased to announce her new life and officially confirms the uncontested dissolution of her marriage to Mark Hayes." Below that, in smaller, polite print, were the names and contact details of my divorce lawyer, framed as my new legal representative. Chloe's eyes widened, jumping from the slide to my face. The color drained from her cheeks again, but this time, it was pure, unadulterated shock. She finally understood the purpose of the past 3 months. The yacht trip, the love notes, the compliance audit, it was all a massive, elaborate, documented exit strategy. "You're using the company restructuring party to announce your divorce," she whispered, horrified. "No, Chloe," I corrected gently. "I'm using the party you organized to announce my new life. This is the closure I promised myself. I spent 3 months ensuring this transition was clean, professional, and entirely on my terms. You were instrumental in that process. You proved that my marriage deserved a spectacular farewell by meticulously planning the extravagant trip I'm taking to celebrate my freedom." I picked up the yacht confirmation folder again and smiled. "Think of the yacht as my severance package from Mark. And think of this party as your severance package from professional deceit. Your last task is to coordinate the public announcement of the end of the very thing you were trying to break, using your corporate resources to do it." She was speechless. The irony, the poetic justice of the situation, was breathtakingly cruel. She had to use her professional acumen to host the party, celebrating the defeat of her affair. "And one more thing," I added, my voice dropping back to that firm, managerial tone. "Mark will be attending. I want him seated near the front for the presentation. I don't want any distractions." Chloe swallowed hard, clutching the slide printout like a lifeline. I'll get the invitations out now. I'll make it perfect." She left my office, and, true to her core, she threw herself into the task. The efficiency of a humiliated professional is a thing to behold. By 5 p.m., the HR open plan office had been transformed. Elegant black and white decor, expensive canapes, a string quartet playing in the corner. The entire company showed up: marketing, finance, legal, the whole corporate ecosystem I had manipulated. Mark arrived looking pale and utterly defeated, wearing a suit that suddenly looked ill-fitting. He saw me and shot me a look of pure, cold hatred mixed with fear. He saw Chloe, flawlessly managing the caterers, issuing instructions, and maintaining a rigid mask of professional competence, and he knew they were both trapped in my final, brilliant scene. At 6 p.m., I walked to the front of the room, tapped the microphone, and the noise died down. I had their attention. I gave a short, elegant speech about the company's future, my new role, and the importance of transparency and unwavering integrity in the workplace. I thanked several key team members for their dedication and support during this challenging period of restructuring. Then I smiled, truly, genuinely smiled, for the first time in months. And finally, I announced, raising my champagne flute high, I want to propose a final toast to new beginnings, not just for the company, but for my own personal life. I raised my hand and signaled to Chloe, who was standing by the A/B setup. She met my eyes, a final, despairing look of professional obligation, and pressed the button. The main screen instantly lit up, displaying the stark black and white slide. Our official fresh start. Freya Hayes is pleased to announce her new life and officially confirms the uncontested dissolution of her marriage to Mark Hayes. A collective gasp swept through the room, followed by the stunned, horrified silence I had waited months for. Mark, seated directly in front, looked like he had been physically hit. Chloe stood frozen by the projector, her masterpiece of an event now serving as the backdrop for the public shaming of her lover and the triumphant declaration of my freedom. I took a slow, deep sip of champagne, savoring the moment of absolute, complete closure. I had not only fixed my own life, I had fixed the structural problem that had been my marriage. The only remaining task was to take the first step into my new, unburdened life. The moment the divorce slide flashed onto the screen, everything I had endured for the past 3 months coalesced into a single, crystalline point of absolute closure. The sound of the collective gasp from the office crowd was the most beautiful music I had ever heard. I didn't wait for the murmuring to start. I simply raised my glass higher, offered one final, graceful nod, and began my exit. "Thank you all for celebrating my fresh start," I said, my voice resonating with cool confidence. I placed my champagne flute carefully on the nearest table, retrieved my small, designer handbag, and walked toward the projector booth where Chloe was still standing, paralyzed by her final act of service. The crowd parted for me. I saw Mark, still frozen in his chair, his face a mask of sick disbelief. He finally knew the full extent of his punishment. His betrayal had not only ended his marriage, but it had financed his ex-wife's extravagant freedom and been announced to his entire professional network by his mistress. He tried to speak, tried to get up, but the moment was mine, and he was powerless to stop it. I reached Chloe. She looked at me with a desperate, defeated plea in her eyes. "Freya, I'm so sorry. I didn't know you knew. I never meant." I didn't let her finish. I reached out and gently placed my hands on her shoulders. My touch was soft, but the underlying message was iron. "You made a spectacular party, Chloe. Truly flawless. You executed my final request perfectly. You're efficient, professional, and excellent under pressure. I appreciate your service." I paused, letting the formal, dismissive phrasing land. I reached into my handbag and pulled out a single, sealed envelope. "This is for you. A complete, unedited, signed copy of my divorce papers and Mark's contact details. This is your problem now, not mine. As of this moment, your role as my executive assistant has been fulfilled. Please consider the rest of the year a paid leave of absence, effective immediately. Use the time to find a position that better aligns with your personal interests." It wasn't a firing, it was a professional banishment. I was giving her money to go away, ensuring she couldn't sue for wrongful termination, and creating a clean, unassailable break. I used the corporate system to cleanly erase her from my life. Her contract was terminated by mutual, professional satisfaction. She was left with the ultimate, crushing reality. She had lost the man, lost her original job, and was now being paid to disappear by the wife she tried to ruin. She took the envelope, her hand trembling. "So this is it? You're just leaving?" "I am," I confirmed. "I'm leaving the marriage, I'm leaving the department, and I'm leaving the chaos you two created." I glanced around the elegant room one last time. "You see, Chloe, I don't need this job anymore. I have a spectacular yacht booked in the Mediterranean for the next 2 weeks, thanks to your tireless work. I have a significant financial settlement secured, and I have total, unburdened freedom. I turned away from her and walked toward the elevator. The office was buzzing behind me, a cacophony of confused whispers and rubbernecking. I could feel every eye on my back, but I didn't rush. I walked at a calm, controlled pace, savoring the feeling of walking away from the old Freya, the one who was naive, heartbroken, and trapped. As I reached the elevator bank, Mark finally found his legs. He stumbled toward me, his voice a frantic, desperate rasp. Freya! Wait! We need to talk about this. You can't just leave everything. I stopped just outside the elevator door and turned to him one last time. I looked him up and down, not with anger, but with profound pity and detachment. You're right, Mark, I said. I can't just leave everything. I'm taking the things that matter most, my self-respect, my career integrity, and the fully paid, 2-week, crude yacht trip around the Greek islands. The elevator door opened, cool air washing over me. Enjoy the party you didn't know you were paying for. And tell Chloe she did a phenomenal job. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the ground floor button. As the doors closed, cutting off Mark's frantic, protesting voice and the stunned silence of the office, I finally let the cold facade drop. I leaned my head back against the smooth steel of the elevator wall, closed my eyes, and let out a long, silent breath. It wasn't relief and it wasn't joy. It was peace. The conflict was resolved. The documents were filed. The debt had been repaid, not in tears and screams, but in cold, hard, professional transactions. I walked out of the corporate building and into the bustling city night. I didn't go home. That house was his problem now. I had a reservation at a 5-star hotel near the airport, a suitcase already packed with travel clothes, and a one-way ticket to Santorini in the morning. I was walking away from the mess, the betrayal, and the entire life that had been built on a lie. My revenge wasn't about vengeance. It was about reclamation. I had reclaimed my time, my dignity, and my future, leaving behind 2 people who were now forced to navigate the financial and emotional wreckage I had so elegantly created. The story was over. My new life had officially begun. If you enjoyed hearing about Freya's cold-blooded revenge and flawless execution, please drop a comment, like this video, and subscribe for more long-form viral stories.